Amazing grace, how sweet the sound that saved a wretch like me. I once was lost, but now am found. Was blind, but now I see. Well, more on that hymn in a few moments. Following the tragic death of a black American man, George Floyd, under the knee of a white American police officer, anti-racism protests have spread across the world. And in the UK, the most visible sign of the unrest was the toppling of a statue in Bristol that was dispatched into the harbour. The statue was an image of Edward Colston, who lived from 1636 to 1721 and who was a successful merchant and philanthropist who gave much to the city of Bristol. What's wrong with that, you might say? But Colston was a slave trader. The toppling of Colston's statue has prompted the reappraisal of many other memorials to historical figures. Rightly so, I would say, for we shouldn't honour those who profited from inflicting immense suffering on others. And many more statues are likely to come down in the months to come. It got me thinking, who would I put in their place? My thoughts turned to John Newton, an Anglican clergyman of old who ministered at Olney in the UK and who is the writer of the much-loved hymn, Amazing Grace. He was born shortly after Colston died in 1725, and I wondered to myself, is there a statue to John Newton? It turns out that there is. It's in Buncrana, County Donegal, Ireland, in the Amazing Grace Park, as it's called. And yet, there are people who would take it down. You see, Newton was a slave trader. And if the story stopped there, I would agree. Take it down, get rid of it, don't remember a man who perpetrated such heinous acts. But Newton's life changed. In 1748, at the age of 23, the ship on which he was crew was caught in a violent storm of such ferocity that Newton thought that he was going to die. He cried out to God. After many days, the storm subsided and the ship limped into port on the coast of Ireland. Newton sought out the church. He took communion at the first opportunity and he dedicated his life to God thereafter. He later wrote, "I thought there never was or could be such a sinner as myself. I concluded that my sins were too great to be forgiven." Yet he found out that they could be forgiven. And still, there are people who say, take down the statue. You see, Newton continued in the slave trade for a further 6 years. If the story stopped there, I would agree. Take it down, get rid of it. Don't remember a man who perpetrated such heinous acts. But Newton's life continued to change, slowly. On health grounds, he left the life at sea and he worked towards becoming a clergyman. 9 years on, he achieved his dream and he went to Olney as curate. And it was here that he began to write hymns. In 1772, he wrote Amazing Grace, and what an amazing testimony to God's love and forgiveness it is. And yet still, there are those who say, take down the statue. The hymn was a sham, a cover-up, a salve to a guilty conscience, they say. And if the story stopped there, I think I would agree. Take it down, get rid of it, don't remember a man who perpetrated slavery. I might also think, there but for the grace of God go I. For which of us has not done something of which we are ashamed, which we were desperate to be forgiven and leave in the past? We know too that whilst changed in our spirits, it can take our behaviour a while to catch up, a lifetime even. 34 years after leaving the slave trade, Newton wrote a pamphlet in which he apologised. In his words, it was a confession which comes too late. It will always be a subject of humiliating reflection to me that I was once an active instrument in a business at which my heart now shudders. He had copies of the pamphlet sent to every member of Parliament in the UK, and so many were distributed that it had to be reprinted. Newton became a friend and advisor to William Wilberforce as he battled for the abolition of the slave trade. On the 23rd of February 1807, 20 years after he first attempted it, Wilberforce's bill to abolish the slave trade was finally passed by Parliament and became law 2 months later. 6 months after that, Newton died, having seen success from the actions added to his faith. And yet still there may be some cries of "take down that statue." This time, I disagree. Leave it there. Keep it. Remember the man who once was lost but then found, was blind but came to see by the amazing grace of God. We all have a past, but God, by his grace, gives us a future. It comes to us as it did to Newton through God the Son, Jesus the Christ, who died on the cross. And grateful for the forgiveness of his past and thankful for his future hope, Newton added his words and his actions in the present to those seeking to abolish the slave trade that he had previously practiced. Through his deeds, he demonstrated that he knew the reality of God's amazing grace in his life. May we too let our deeds demonstrate God's amazing grace for us.